There is a peculiar kind of danger in the world, one that doesn't come with flashing lights or loud warnings. It walks quietly, often wearing a pleasant smile. It shakes your hand, looks you in the eye, and says all the right things, but something feels off, something invisible, yet unmistakably cold. You sense it not in what they say, but in what they lack: empathy, conscience, depth. The most dangerous people in the world are not always the loudest or the most violent. They're the ones who can mask their emptiness behind charm, intelligence, and strategic calculation. These people don't just commit harm, they manipulate systems, shape institutions, and sometimes lead nations. They rise quietly until the damage they cause becomes unavoidable. But what makes someone truly dangerous? Is it a flaw in their character or a feature of how our society rewards a certain kind of behavior? Is it a lack of conscience or an excess of control? Psychologist Robert Hare, who spent decades studying psychopathy, believed that some people are simply wired to feel nothing, and that their calm, calculated demeanor is precisely what makes them so hard to detect. Philosopher Niccolò Machiavelli, writing in the 16th century, argued that power often belongs to those who understand how to manipulate perception, and that morality, in politics especially, is often just theater. And Carl Jung, ever the explorer of the human soul, warned that the shadow, the dark side we repress, doesn't vanish when ignored. It grows, and sometimes it takes human form. This video is not about labeling others. It's about understanding what we're really up against when we feel confused by someone's charm, yet disturbed by their presence. It's about the predators who walk among us and the predator that may live inside us. Together, we'll explore 6 core insights that blend philosophy, psychology, and real world reflection. Each one will pull back the mask, not only of dangerous people, but of the systems that empower them and the blind spots within ourselves that make us vulnerable to their influence. Let steps begin. Imagine you're in a meeting. Across the table is someone who seems calm, confident, even likable. They make eye contact. They smile at just the right moments. They're articulate, persuasive, even charming. But something in your gut tightens. You can't explain it, but you sense there's something missing. What you're sensing may be the absence of empathy. Dr. Robert Hare, the psychologist who pioneered the study of psychopathy, once said that if you meet someone who seems too good to be true, who lies easily, manipulates effortlessly, and yet never seems burdened by guilt or fear, you may be dealing with what he called a successful psychopath. And these individuals are not always found in prisons. Often they're in boardrooms or politics or high status social circles. At the core of Hare's research is a disturbing reality. Some people lack the emotional machinery most of us take for granted. They do not feel remorse the way you do. They don't experience fear in the same way. Their emotional inner world is a cold, empty landscape, but one hidden behind a well-rehearsed performance. These individuals can mimic emotions, but not feel them. They can study your expressions, mirror your words, and respond with rehearsed warmth, all while calculating how to extract something from you. This is their power. Your empathy makes you hesitate, reflect, and consider the impact of your actions. Theirs does not. In a competition between someone with a conscience and someone without one, the latter often moves faster, strikes harder, and takes more than others would even dare to imagine. Philosopher Thomas Hobbes believed that human nature, in its rawest form, was self interested, that in the state of nature, life would be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. But what if, for some, this state never really left? What if their inner world is still defined by domination, deception, and survival, while yours is guided by connection, care, and moral intuition? This is not just a clinical concern, it's an existential one. Because if you're an empathetic person, you're wired to project your emotional world onto others. You assume they care because you care. You hesitate to harm because you imagine what it would feel like to be harmed. But when the person opposite you feels no such thing, you're not having a shared interaction. You're being studied, mapped, played. And here's the paradox: your humanity, which makes you capable of deep love and beauty, also makes you vulnerable, not because it's weak, but because it's visible. So, what do? We must start by accepting that not everyone operates with the same emotional equipment. Not all hearts are built alike. Awareness is the first act of self defense. When we stop expecting empathy from those who are incapable of it, we stop falling into their traps. But awareness alone is not enough. We need to learn how to recognize the signs, not just in others, but in ourselves. The discomfort, the silence in our gut, the warning signal that doesn't come in words, but in a subtle sense of being used. To deny that some people are empty inside is a form of spiritual naivete, but to become cynical is just as dangerous. The task is balance, to remain human in a world that sometimes rewards inhumanity without losing our ability to feel, to care, and to love. So the first truth is hard, but essential. They don't feel what you feel, and that's their power. And if we ignore that, their power grows in the dark. But now let's go deeper, because not only do they lack empathy, they also know how to hide it. In the next section, we'll explore the seductive, strategic nature of their disguise. There's a story that echoes through history. A charming leader rises to power. He's articulate, charismatic. He speaks of hope, of vision, of the people, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, the smiles become smirks, the promises dissolve into control. The warmth was never real, it was a mask, and by the time it slips, it's too late. Niccolò Machiavelli, the 16th century political philosopher, saw this pattern with piercing clarity. In The Prince, he argued that a ruler need not be good, only appear to be. He wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." For Machiavelli, the mask isn't a betrayal of morality, it's a tool of power. This wasn't cynicism for the sake of cruelty. It was a revelation about how the world works when virtue and perception diverge. And it still applies today, not just to princes and presidents, but to managers, influencers, partners, even friends. When someone dangerous wears a moral mask, their deception becomes not just personal, but systemic. They become the wolf in shepherd's clothing. In psychological terms, this is called impression management. High functioning psychopaths and narcissists are often skilled at appearing empathetic. They study human behavior the way a predator studies prey. They learn how to imitate sincerity, mimic warmth, and perform vulnerability, not to connect, but to control. Carl Jung once observed that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. The mask serves both the predator and the people around them. The predator hides their emptiness. The people avoid confronting the darker truth that sometimes evil smiles. But this raises an uncomfortable question. Why do we fall for the mask? Because the mask often reflects what we wish were true. We want to believe that powerful people are also good, that a calm voice means a kind heart, that someone who flatters us sees us, but the mask isn't just a lie. It's a strategy built on our deepest psychological needs to feel safe, valued. This is why confronting dangerous people often leaves us confused. We don't just feel betrayed, we feel disoriented. Our intuition said something was wrong, but the performance kept reassuring us it was fine. It creates a fracture in the mind, a split between what we feel and what we're told to believe. If you find yourself resonating with this, confused by people who say the right words but radiate the wrong energy, you're not alone. Subscribe if this exploration speaks to something in you. We dive into these deeper patterns every week. So, what sets the way forward? We must learn to see beyond performance, to ask not, what are they saying? But what's missing? Do their words cost them anything? Do their actions match their promises? Do they express remorse when they harm others, or only when they get caught? Machiavelli teaches us not to hate the mask, but to recognize it. Jung urges us to develop the kind of inner clarity that can see through illusion. And Robert Hare reminds us if someone keeps telling you who they are through their patterns, not their persona, believe them. Because the mask isn't sent simply deception, it's tips camouflage. And those who wear it well are often the ones we're most afraid to question. In the next insight, we will go even deeper into the dynamics between the dangerous person and the empathetic one, because sometimes they don't just hide their emptiness, they feed off your light. Have you ever wondered why deeply good people, kind, generous, emotionally intelligent, so often end up entangled with the most manipulative personalities? It seems backwards. Shouldn't the pure hearted be immune to darkness? And yet, again and again, we find the opposite. The light attracts the shadow, not because the light is naive, but because it is useful. Carl Jung warned us of this dynamic in his exploration of the shadow, the unconscious, darker side of the self. He suggested that what we suppress doesn't disappear, it festers, and in others, it can take shape. The most dangerous people are often those whose shadows dominate them entirely. But here's the catch: they need others to stabilize their illusion of control. They need your light to give them warmth they cannot generate themselves. It's not your weakness they exploit, it's your strength, your forgiveness, your belief in their potential, your ability to hold pain with compassion. These qualities, noble in the right context, become weapons in the hands of someone who sees them as levers. They will provoke you, harm you, and then cry foul when you react. They will twist your virtues until they look like flaws, and they'll convince you that you're the one who needs to change. This is the essence of psychological projection. The predator makes you carry their darkness while they wear your light. You apologize more. You doubt yourself more. You start to believe that setting boundaries is cruelty and that enduring abuse is love. This is not just manipulation, it's a slow erosion of self, a reprogramming of your moral compass. Jung believed the only true defense was not to become cold or cynical, but to integrate your own shadow. to become aware of the darkness you too are capable so that it cannot be used against you. When you know your limits, when you've faced your anger, your fear, your capacity for resentment, you become less vulnerable to those who would weaponize your denial. Because here's the paradox: dangerous people often sense what you've hidden from yourself. They spot the unresolved pain, the unspoken guilt, the place in you that still believes love must be earned through suffering. And once they find it, they move in, not with violence, with need, with praise, with "I've never met anyone like you," until you start to believe that helping them is your purpose, that saving them is your path. But here sups the truth. Jung would want you to hear: you are not responsible for healing someone who refuses to face their shadow. You are not obligated to keep giving when your soul is being drained. Your empathy must be married to wisdom, or it will be consumed by those who see it as fuel. So ask yourself, where am I giving from light? And where am I being dimmed? In the next section, we'll look even closer, not at the obvious villains, but the subtle ones, the ones who don't scream or rage, but who smile while quietly dismantling your sense of self. Because not all predators roar, some whisper. It starts subtly: a favor you didn't ask for, a gift that feels like a test, a smile that hides something calculating underneath. They're always just trying to help, but somehow, every time you accept, you feel smaller, more dependent, more confused, more indebted. This is the hallmark of the covert manipulator. We often imagine dangerous people as explosive, aggressive, clearly toxic, but some of the most psychologically damaging individuals don't dominate through overt control, they undermine through strategic care. They weaponize kindness. They smother you with concern. They play the role of the protector, the advisor, the wise friend, all while slowly eroding your confidence, your independence, your sense of self. These are the quiet predators, the ones whose danger is not in what they take from you, but in what they convince you to give up voluntarily. This behavior is central to what psychologists call covert narcissism. Unlike the grandiose narcissist, who demands attention and power, the covert narcissist plays the victim, the misunderstood genius, the quietly wounded soul. They draw you in, not through force, but through your own compassion. And once you're close, they distort your reality. They'll praise you until you shine too brightly. They'll support you until your success threatens them. They'll help you until you rely on them more than yourself. Every gesture seems benevolent, but the underlying motive is always the same: control. And here's the tragic part: many of us don't see it because the behavior mimics what love and friendship look like. After all, isn't it good to care, to support, to sacrifice? Yes, but only when it accepts mutual. In dysfunctional relationships, these patterns create a dynamic psychologist Robin Stern calls the gaslight tango. You begin to doubt your own memory, your own instincts. You second guess every reaction. Over time, you no longer need to be manipulated because you've internalized the manipulator's voice. And this kind of damage doesn't just happen in romantic relationships. It shows up in workplaces, spiritual communities, even families. Anywhere power is masked as mentorship, anywhere support becomes surveillance, anywhere help becomes a leash. Carl Jung warned that the most dangerous people are not those who consciously embrace evil, but those who unconsciously act it out in the name of good. The person who believes they're just helping while controlling everyone around them is often the most unaware of their own shadow. So, how do you protect yourself? You learn to separate kindness from obligation. You ask, does this person honor my autonomy? Do they celebrate my growth or subtly diminish it? You remember genuine care empowers. It respects boundaries. It doesn't require you to shrink in order for someone else to feel needed. And most importantly, you trust your unease. That subtle tension in your chest, that slight disorientation when they speak, that feeling that something is off, even when everything looks fine. That is your intuition whispering, sometimes louder than logic can speak, because not all predators snarl. Some speak gently, and the chains they forge are soft as silk. In the next section, we still zoom out. What happens when the systems we live in, our institutions, workplaces, governments, reward these very traits? What happens when the mask becomes not just personal, but structural? Let's take that deeper look. We like to believe that integrity rises, that good people succeed, that the best among us, the wisest, the most compassionate, will naturally rise to positions of influence. But the truth is harder to swallow. In many of our modern systems, it is not empathy that gets rewarded, but detachment, not humility, but performance, not depth of character, but sharpness of strategy. Robert Hare once remarked, almost bitterly, that if you wanted to study psychopathy in the wild, you shouldn't go to prisons. You should go to the top floors of corporate buildings, because the traits that define a clinical psychopath, superficial charm, lack of remorse, strategic manipulation, are often indistinguishable from what we call strong leadership. This is not a conspiracy. It's a structural reflection of our values. When profit is prioritized over people, when speed is valued more than reflection, when confidence is mistaken for competence, we create a world where the person least burdened by emotion, by doubt, by conscience, has a competitive edge. Niccolò Machiavelli saw this centuries ago. He wrote, "A man who wishes to act entirely virtuously soon meets with what destroys him." In other words, virtue alone cannot survive in a world that rewards vice dressed in noble clothes. Think of it. In a corporate boardroom, who gets promoted? The person who asks hard ethical questions, or the one who makes bold decisions without hesitation? In politics, who rises faster? The candidate who speaks hard truths with humility, or the one who manipulates fear with confidence? In social media, who gains influence? The reflective voice of nuance, or the emotionally explosive entertainer who thrives on attention? Time and again, our systems reward traits that look like strength, but are often just emotional detachment. And who gets punished? The empath, the conscientious objector, the person who hesitates, not out of weakness, but because they care. They are called too sensitive, too soft, not a good fit. They burn out quietly, unseen, under the weight of emotional labor no one else is doing. They carry the team's hidden moral conscience, while others take credit. Carl Jung warned that when a culture represses its emotional and moral center, the shadow will eventually erupt. A society that ignores empathy creates leaders without it. And then, in crisis, we wonder why no one cares. But what if the solution isn't to make empaths tougher? What if the real revolution is giving empathy power and rethinking how we define leadership, strength, and value? Because here's the quiet tragedy. We live in systems where sociopathic traits are often indistinguishable from success, and so the most dangerous people don't hide in shadows. They sit in corner offices. They speak from podiums. They shape our policies, our algorithms, our futures. And unless we awaken to this, unless we change what we reward, we will continue to be led by those who cannot feel the consequences of their actions. But this leads to one final, humbling insight. Not all danger is external. What if the real threat isn't set just out there, but inside us? It steps comforting to think of evil as something out there, a corrupt politician, a manipulative boss, a cold, calculating stranger behind dark eyes. But Carl Jung offered a much harder truth. He wrote, the best political, social, and spiritual work we can do is to withdraw the projection of our shadow onto others. In other words, the darkness we fear in others often reflects something unexamined within ourselves. The most dangerous people in the world may indeed be heartless, exploitative, emotionally hollow, but if we're not careful, our obsession with identifying them can blind us to a subtler risk, becoming like them in our effort to protect ourselves. You have seen this, the gentle soul who becomes hardened by betrayal, the empath who, after years of being used, decides to stop caring altogether, the activist who fights injustice but slowly begins to mirror the cruelty they oppose. Jung called this identification with the shadow. When the darkness we repress begins to leak into our identity, we become fragmented. We lose our ability to discern. We lash out, shut down, or rationalize our own harmful behavior under the banner of justice or self protection. The key isn't to eliminate the shadow. That's impossible. The key is to integrate it, to see the part of you that can manipulate and choose not to acknowledge your capacity for rage and learn to channel it wisely, to understand the same instincts that make others dangerous live in you too. This is inspect weakness. It specters maturity, because when we refuse to see our shadow, we become more susceptible to manipulation, not less. We get shocked, outraged, disoriented. We idealize others too quickly. We react emotionally instead of responding wisely, and in doing so, we make ourselves vulnerable, not just to predators, but to our own unconscious behaviors. Think of someone who hurt you deeply, not to excuse them, but to see clearly what qualities in them do you most reject? What part of yourself might you be avoiding? The goal here is not self condemnation, it's integration. The more conscious you are of your own shadow, the less control it has over you, and the harder it is for others to exploit it. This is why Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The truth is, we all wear masks. We all struggle with ego, fear, resentment, pride. And if we deny that, we still keep projecting all evil outward until one day we realize the very thing we feared, we self become. So what now? We turn inward, not to wallow in guilt, but to cultivate wholeness. We stop splitting the world into good people and monsters and begin asking harder questions. Where am I unconscious? Where am I performative? Where am I afraid to face myself? Because the most powerful protection from dangerous people is to become someone they cannot confuse, seduce, or manipulate. Not because you stare cold, but because you stare whole. And that brings us to our final reflection. Let sex bring everything we have learned into one cohesive insight and ask, what kind of person do we now need to become? Let SEPs return to the question we began with. What makes someone truly dangerous? Is STETS not just cruelty? Is SEP's coldness beneath charm, calculation behind kindness, and most disturbingly, it's how easily our systems and even our own hearts can be fooled. But after everything we tis explored, here steps the deeper realization. The truly dangerous person is not just a villain in a story, they are a mirror, reflecting both our societal blind spots and our personal shadows. And our task is not just to fear them, but to understand what makes us vulnerable to them. So let's remember what we have learned, the six hard won insights. They don't feel what you feel, and that's their power. Some people lack empathy, not metaphorically, literally, and we must stop projecting our conscience onto those who have none. The mask isn't set, just a lie. It sets a strategy. As Machiavelli warned, image often matters more than virtue. We must learn to see past performance and look for integrity in action. They exploit your light to feed their shadow. Your empathy is not weakness, but it can be used against you unless it's balanced with boundaries and wisdom. Not all predators are obvious. Some are as helpful. Manipulation doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers in the voice of concern. Trust the dissonance beneath the kindness. Systems reward the sociopath and punish the empath. We live in structures that often value detachment over depth. The revolution begins not by waiting for them to change, but by changing what we reward. The shadow isn't just out there, it's in you too. Evil doesn't just wear other people's faces, it hides in your blind spots. True strength is owning your shadow and choosing the light with full awareness. These are not easy truths, but they are essential because here steps the invitation. You are not a passive observer in this story. You are not just someone who has been hurt or manipulated or confused. You are also someone who can grow, who can wake up, who can develop the kind of presence that sees clearly and acts wisely. You can become the person who recognizes the mask and doesn't flinch, who protects their light without becoming hard or bitter, who confronts darkness, not with hatred, but with grounded clarity. This is rare, but the world quietly aches for people like this. Not perfect people, not invulnerable people, but integrated ones. And so, I leave you with a challenge and a hope. Look inward. Where are your boundaries too soft or your heart too closed? Where have you excused the dangerous or ignored the intuitive warning? Where have you, even subtly, begun to mirror the behavior of those who harmed you? Bring light there, bring breath, bring truth, and then return to the world not as a victim, but as a steward of sanity. If this journey resonated, I invite you to subscribe. Every week we explore these deeper human patterns, not to judge the world, but to awaken in it. And if you have thoughts, questions, reflections, share them. This is not a lecture, it's a conversation, a shared search for wisdom in a noisy, chaotic age. Because when enough of us wake up, the masks begin to fall, and what remains is something real, something rare, something whole.